Call to order a regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Goodyear that's being held on Wednesday, May 20th at 7 o'clock. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the record show that 6 commissioners are present. Commissioner Loretano is not with us tonight. I would like a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission held on April 15th, 2009. I have a motion from Commissioner Schlosser and a second from Commissioner Ryan. All those in favor say aye.
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 Ayes have it, 6-0. Public comments. As I said before, if you want to speak on an agenda item, I will ask you to please fill out a card. If there is some other item that you want to talk to the Planning Commission about, we also ask for you to fill out a card. Now is the time for you to come up, and you will have your 3 minutes if there is something you want to speak on that is a non-agenda item. Does anybody want to speak on a non-agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on. Ex parte communications. Anyone?
No.
Nobody? Okay, no ex parte communications. All right, first, we don't have a consent agenda tonight, right? Okay. Okay, first case, I'm going to open the public hearing. This is case 09-350-00001, the Refinery Christian Church special use permit. And the presenter is, let me make sure, Ms. Craver, right?
Yes, sir.
Good to see you.
Thank you, sir. Refinery Christian and RB Building Systems applied for the special use zoning to locate the church in the Bullard Commerce Center. It was completed in 2005 with 6 multi-tenant flex buildings on 15 acres on the west side of Bullard, north of Van Buren. Refinery Christian will renovate 4 of the tenant spaces, approximately 10,000 square feet. They will be located in Building B, and the majority of the space will be worship area, and they will have space for Sunday school, and the rest offices and meeting rooms. Church services will be held at 9:15 and 11:15 on Sunday mornings, and Sunday school will be held simultaneously. No planned weekday services at this time, no daycare, and no school other than the Sunday school. Currently, the church has 180 members. Parking spaces for the church will be occupied in the front of the building, to the rear of the building, and then also further to the building, or north of the building to the north and south of the building to the south. There are no assigned parking spaces in the center. Staff has evaluated the proposed church use in this location and has determined that it meets the criteria for special use zoning and is recommending that the commission recommend approval to council. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, questions of staff. Commissioner Schlosser.
I have a question in regards to public safety. I don't have a problem with the church being there or with parking. It's on Sundays. I know we had the same issue, be at the southeast corner of Litchfield and Van Buren. It was the same situation.
The
So
church
the
going in the
parking
commercial
doesn't bother
center.
me.
Right.
But in regards to public safety, and I'm sure whoever's in charge of that will figure it out, but are these buildings designed to accommodate several hundred people?
Yeah,
As far as sprinklers and
Right, they will have to go through a tenant improvement process through the building safety department, and fire and building safety will evaluate all of that as part of that process.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions of staff?
Yeah, I do. Karen, how much of the 6-building complex is occupied? What percentage?
I believe it's less than 50%, but there are folks here from RB Building Systems who could confirm the exact figure for you. I think it's more vacant than it is occupied, unfortunately.
Other questions of staff? Karen, I have one. Stipulation 2 talks about the city reserves the right to initiate revocation of a special use permit.
Right.
Is that something new that we've started putting into special use permits? I just don't remember seeing this in some of our previous cases.
I don't believe that it is new, but because there are certain criteria that each applicant has to meet in receiving approval of a special use, effects on adjacent properties, light, noise, this and that, if any of those criteria are violated or no longer met by the applicant, this gives us the ability and gives them the heads up that the use could be revoked.
Okay. Can I direct a question to the senior staff for a minute?
Sure, that'd be Harvey, senior.
Right.
Yeah.
Is this going to be a new standard policy, Harvey, on special use permits? I mean, I haven't seen it. This is the first time I've seen it in 6 years, I think.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I think we have used it possibly once before. If there are
I've been traveling that day.
if there are standards that have to be complied with, and that's the only way we can monitor that and take enforcement action if we have a stipulation like this. So,
I think it's a good idea. But just want to reinforce that I think we should see it more often.
okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's absolutely necessary. It should be there.
Right, well, there's two senior members of the commission supporting it. I'm sure I can get the rest of the brethren up here to think that way. Okay, any other questions of staff?
Well, I do have a comment, and it's hard to be against a church, but I just don't think the parking configuration is very conducive to a church, and I know most of the traffic is there on Sunday morning, but, this complex, the ingress and egress and the traffic patterns is set up for a low volume but steady volume of traffic throughout the day. And a church, is going to have 150 cars come in a 10-minute period and all of them leave at once. It's not going to be a steady flow through the day. And I guess you can accommodate that, but it's just a little bit of a concern.
We thought about possible conflicts with the other uses in there, but because the church is, through approval of the use permit, restricted to just Sunday services, we felt any conflict would be minimal, that those other businesses would not be open. And should they choose to come in and try to have service or request to have services on other days, it would have to come back through this process, and that would all have to be reevaluated. But as it currently stands in the center, we felt comfortable with it.
Thank you.
Okay. Somebody here from the applicant would like to take the podium and make a comment? Okay, is there any representative, you're from the leasing company, is that correct?
I'm from the Refinery Christian Church. Jim just arrived.
Okay. Okay. I have one public speaker, Kevin Siegel. Did I say that right?
I waive my right to speak.
All right, thank you. Anybody else want to talk about this item? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and commission discussion. Comments from the Commissioner Miller?
Well, I in addressing Bob's concern, I think that on the second page, it says that, it sort of spells out if there are negative impacts that they can have some redress. So, if it doesn't work out, we have something to fall back on.
Anything? Could I ask the RB representative to come up here, please? Could you identify yourself for the record?
Yes, sir. Jim Penrod with RB Building Systems.
All right, thank you. Several months ago, I had a conversation with one of your tenants who happens to be a personal friend of mine, and he was very concerned with the parking and sort of concerned with where you were going, and that's the lighting company, LSH Lighting, I think it is. Have you resolved they're not here, but have you resolved the issues that they had?
Yes, sir. I believe we have. I've met with him personally, so I do think that we have those problems resolved.
Okay, thank you very much. All right.
Chairman Gelser?
Yes,
I can
ma'am.
also tell you from a staff standpoint, we have not heard from the gentleman who owns that business since prior to this item being scheduled before you in April.
Okay. All right. In that case, can I have a motion to approve the special use permit for the Refinery Christian Church, please?
Commissioner Chair, I make a motion we approve case number 09350-00001, special use zoning to allow a church use in the Bullard Goodyear, I can't speak tonight, Goodyear Commerce Center.
Thank you very much. I have a motion from Commissioner Miller and a
Second.
second from Commissioner Schlosser. All those in favor say aye.
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 Ayes have it, 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to open the public hearing. This is case number 082000011, Planned Area Development Amendment for Parcel 4 of the Palm Valley Promenade Commercial Center. Mr. Kretschia, take it away, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. This item was before the Commission on April 15th. It was continued at that meeting to allow for proper notice to occur. Since that time, staff has an applicant. We have followed through with the notice and with a neighborhood meeting for this rezoning. This is a request for a PAD amendment. It will change the land use from mixed-use commercial to high-density residential. Increase the maximum building height from 30 to 40 feet, and that density will be capped at 18 dwelling units per acre. And I know the Commission is familiar with the site, so I'll just go over this real quickly. 145th Avenue, McDowell Road. This is the Lifetime Fitness facility, apartment complex, Adiamo apartment complex, Camelot Home subdivision here to the east. And this is the Palm Valley Master Plan, and here we are with the subject property right here, currently designated with mixed-use commercial land use. A conceptual site plan was included with the materials for the rezoning request. Gives a conceptual picture of how the site could develop at 18 dwelling units per acre. And here the main entrance is off of 145th, along with access here to a loop road that will be constructed as part of the continuing promenade development. Two-story buildings are located along 145th. The three-story buildings will be located from about this point further to the west. On May 12th, citizen review meeting was held. Many residents, stakeholders were in attendance at that meeting. Overview of what happened at that meeting is presented in the staff report, so I won't go into too much detail unless the commission has questions. With the recommended stipulations, staff does find that the proposal is compatible with the surrounding area and is consistent with the general plan. As such, staff is recommending approval. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair. Staff is available for questions.
Questions of staff? Seeing none, I'm going to invite Mr. Rosen, the applicant, to come up and speak to us if he cares to.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Mitch Rosen. I work for Suncor Development Company. What you have before you tonight is a change in the zoning from an existing underlying commercial zoning to a multifamily zoning. I want to talk a little bit about the things that are before you tonight. One is the change of zoning. The second is the density and height. And the third is the context in which this project is. And I want to point some things out as you guys and lady consider this application. This property is zoned currently for commercial use. But if you look at the amount of commercial development in the area, that this site is not a viable commercial site when compared to many of the other sites. And the primary reason behind that is it doesn't have street frontage on a major street. Instead, the frontage is on the primary frontage is on 145th. And as I said, candidly, there's quite a bit of commercial property there, and there are only so many tenants, and so this would be a very difficult site to develop as a commercial property. If it was built as a commercial property, it would likely face the inner part of our development, fronting on the Loop Road. The result of that would be that the rear of the project, or the back of the project, would front on 145th. I don't know what the development would be, but the back of the house, as much as you try and make it nice, and we would certainly do that as we went through the process, is still the back of the house to that project. While we are asking for an increase in height from 30 to 40 feet, the maximum allowable height in the commercial zoning designation is 56 feet, I believe. And I went out just to give you a feel for sense for what that feels like. This is a Lifetime Fitness building, which we did and worked very hard to bring to this project. We thought it was a real asset to the community, but it changed the structure of the remainder of the property. In other words, it's a large building, and as a result, that which finds itself behind it struggles from a commercial standpoint. The reason I show you this site, this is to show you, and that's me there. This is what type of structure could be built in a commercially zoned designation. So we are coming in front of you and asking for a multifamily site that would be much lower in its intensity of use. With regard to the density and height, in order for this project to be economically viable and to be a high-end multifamily site, there are certain fixed costs that come with these nicer projects. For example, community center, pool, fancy entries, and those are fixed costs. And as a result, you need additional density more than a low-density project to support those kind of amenities. Those that are lower density can't support those kind of amenities and then don't necessarily lead to the higher-end multifamily sites. Lastly, I wanted to put this into context as to where this site is relative to its surroundings. I would like to point out that this is in the high-intensity mixed-use corridor in the general land use plan. And the definition of that it denotes areas identified as mixed-use integrating high-density residential development, 20 units and above is what they're trying to encourage there. We're requesting a maximum of 18 units per acre. This concludes my comments with regard to this site.
Mitch, could you put the other picture back up, the first one that you had, just so, because I suspect there are questions. Okay, thank you. Questions of the applicant? Questions of the applicant? Commissioner Schlosser?
I read somewhere in here that some of the residents were opposed to the extra 10 feet because of the view. Do you know where they would live on this aerial here? Or?
Well, the answer to your question specifically, no. I will point out that, and it's a little difficult to see here on this site plan, but this project here is where I assume most of the residents that would have input would be located. We also have a golf course here, apartments over here, and then more residential. I believe there was one, at least one neighbor that had concern that from this community when we talked about where the entry should be located. And when we talked about moving the entry up here, there was some concern that headlights would then shine into their home. I didn't answer your question because I don't know the answer. But I will. I did bring another photograph that I think may be helpful. I took I took two shots just to show. We played with the idea of doing a schematic design to help understand view lines and the like. The reality is the way staff has put this stipulation on. No three-story product can be built within 180 feet of the property line. And then from there, you get outside of the property line. For example, there's a 60-foot right-of-way, I believe, on 145th. I mean, it's almost 240 feet, or it's 240 feet, which before you get to a three-story building would be almost a football field away. But what I wanted to show here, and I just ask you to look at this two-story structure here. So I stood in the street and I took a picture of this gatehouse, and then I moved around to try and show from a view standpoint what happens when you move the angle, and then how that affects what happens behind it. And what I'm trying to point out here is that with the stipulation of having to be 180 feet off the property line and requesting an additional 1 unit in height, then I don't think that there'll be a significant impact from the views. There was some concern expressed about blocking the views of the mountains, and what I would contend, and I would ask that you consider, is that something like this would have a much more significant impact on those type of views and the feel of the community around it. Also, I did show, and I want to give the Planning Commission an opportunity to see, this is one of the entries to a project, and we've talked to this developer at some length about buying and developing one of these parcels. And this is another entry to one of their projects at Litchfield and Bell, just south of, so it's southeast of Litchfield and Bell. But my point in showing this is the kind of high-end multifamily project that I think the community should expect from this development.
I had a few more questions, Mr. Chairman. Do you know what the vacancy amount or rate is to the apartment complex to the north?
I was told by the property manager that it was 40% vacant. And when I spoke to her, my comment was it would not be prudent to develop this property at this time, only to compete with that. The issue is to ready certain parcels in the community so that when the market does turn around, that certain parcels like this one are ready to deliver to the marketplace. In my opinion, this is a logical parcel to do that.
Okay. I'd just like to say I agree with your proposed new use. As far as commercial there, we have enough problems with commercial on section line corners, let alone tucked behind a 50-foot building. So I agree with that. I don't have a problem with the extra 10 feet. And so I support what you're trying to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions of the applicant? Mitch, could you, in your best estimate, put on your crystal ball and give us a time frame? Are we looking, if situations turn around, do you think this is a 3-year out project, a 5-year out project, or even further out than that?
Well, first, I have to say that Suncor does not generally build apartment complexes. It would be our intent to have another
Right,
developer
you would
do it.
sell this to somebody else who.
That's correct. The second comment to that is, I don't know when this market is going to turn. And what gives me some solace is neither did Warren Buffett, because he made bad mistakes last year. And as I look forward, I don't know. My gut is there's a couple of years before the market stabilizes, settles in, and begins to move forward. But when it does, Goodyear is due. It is due because it is ripe with all the things necessary for this to happen, for development to happen, including the mall and the freeway system. So I don't know, but I would guess it's a couple of years anyway out.
Thank you. Could
I'm
you
sorry I
put
couldn't
the,
answer it more definitive.
Put the aerial back up, because I have several people who want to make public comments, and I think the aerial will probably be the most useful. There we go.
I also want to offer out that I have this one as well, which shows it specifically.
You can just leave them both there, and the public can decide what they want to use to amplify their arguments. Any other questions of the applicant? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have several people who have indicated comment cards, and I will try not to butcher your name. Mr. John Hines. Please identify your, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is John Hines. I live in the Corteal subdivision on 14441 West Desert Flower Drive, right across from this proposed subdivision. And as Mr. Rosen alluded to in his comments, this is the area that they are proposing to develop at some point, directly across from our neighborhood. Now, we also talked about a golf course in this neighborhood up here. Well, this neighborhood is not affected. The only neighborhood that is affected by this development is our neighborhood, a neighborhood that is not completely developed itself. However, we're still here to defend our neighborhood. There's probably 25 or 26 homes in that neighborhood at this time, so nobody else gets to speak for us but us. Now, currently, that is zoned mixed commercial. The way I understand it, the piece of property that is owned right now or occupied right now by Lifetime Fitness was also owned by Suncor. Now, Suncor chose to sell that piece of property, and when they did that, that made that piece of property behind it no longer economically viable for commercial use. Now, to me, that's a mistake on Suncor's part, not on our part. So we should not have to suffer the consequences of that. Now, I understand that we could get a big, major building in there that could go up to 56 feet. But as Mr. Rosen pointed out himself, the property is not commercially viable. So I would rather take the chances of not having somebody come in because it's not a commercially viable piece of property versus having a high-density multifamily unit coming in right next to one that is already there. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to butcher this. Debbie Moselle? Morgan. Okay, well.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's Morgan.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members of the commission. Yes, I am Debbie Morgan. Yes, I am the community manager, if you will, property manager of Addiamo Palm Valley 302 apartment community, which is directly north of the area that we are discussing this evening. I think it would be a little cliche to say that, in the market today, and I do understand what Mr. Rosen is saying, that this is projected for several years down, the development. But in all reality, once the property is sold, there's an X amount of time frame that usually the lenders, so forth and so on, and I could go on, which they put a ceiling on the time that you can break ground. He hit us very close based on our conversation. Adiamo Palm Valley did open its doors right before the holiday of 2005. I want everyone to understand it has been a challenge and a struggle to keep the occupancy rate at 75%. That peaked, ladies and gentlemen, honestly, that peaked out March of 2007, 75% occupancy we had. We have been struggling anywhere from 50% up to today, 62%. Over the weekend, I spoke with many of my competition. I never fear the competition, and that's truly not my purpose for being here this evening. It's to speak not only on behalf of Adiamo Palm Valley, but equally as well the other apartment communities out there. God bless them, they opened up their door some 6 months ago, some is just as short as 6 months ago, some longer. People who are faced with having to give answers to not only their owners, but their lenders. When you sit in our shoes, honestly, they do hammer down on you, and they want to know, why aren't you at 95% occupancy? The banks will actually threaten to take over management of the communities if they don't feel that their people are doing the right job. We are out there struggling. These folks that I spoke to are suffering anywhere from 22% to the highest number I had of the most mature of the communities was like 88%. So I say to myself today, and I ask all of you, if you've gone through any of these housing developments of late, the signs are literally falling off, they're rotting off in some cases, the amount of foreclosures. And no, I don't think it's going to be fixable in another year, 2 years, 5 years. None of us ask for the economy to be where it is today. I just can't help but wonder, this piece of land where we're proposing, because financially it's only going to be feasible to go 3 stories high. That I can appreciate, that I can truly understand. My neighboring competition, Aldea, that opened last September, they're 2 stories high. Adiamo Palm Valley, 2 stories high. Most of these fine folks over here that are our neighbors, that thank you very much, when they purchased their homes, and I know they paid very good money for those homes, they embraced at the time Adiamo Palm Valley because they knew that we already existed. They knew the integrity of it. They also knew how well it was managed, how beautiful it looked. And then a surprise comes on their doorstep, and gee, now we're going to propose this. So I can't help but ask, why would we want to not only perhaps block their view, but also what about those folks over there at Adiamo Palm Valley? What happens to them where we're going to have to look into someone else's building and then also have our views blocked? Yes, sir.
Wrap it up, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for at least hearing me out and my concerns.
All right, thank you very much. Mariella or Fawaz Tabali, did I pronounce that correctly? Close.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm one of the residents at Court Tile. We're not extremely happy about having 3-story buildings across the street. At the same time, we would also have the main entrance for the buildings right across from our entrance. It will be 187 apartments big impact to the community, to the traffic, vandalism. We cannot be shy about that because it happens. We can also talk about why do we have to go from commercial to a high density. If that's the case, that the commission decides that apartments should be built, why don't we go to a low density? Because more is not better. Having to change the waiver from 30 to 40 feet, the side yard waiver from 30 to 15 to 20 feet. We are going to feel like we're squashed. Having to change the entrance to another area, the headlights from every single car will be facing my backyard. And according to Mr. Rosen, if we move the angle, we can cover it. Well, I would have to hide in the basement of my house in order to avoid every single headlight from every single car. My house is the third house at the entrance of the Camelot Homes. We also have a golf area right next to it. I'm concerned about teenagers hanging out. It's an open area, and that was designated that way. I am really saddened we have not even moved all the furniture that we have. And at this point, having to have 187 apartments across the street, it's like having, I don't know, like being in Las Vegas. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew Tice.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Tice. My address is 7702 East Doubletree Ranch Road, Suite 300, Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm here tonight on behalf of a number of interested Goodyear property owners who take opposition to this commission's what perceives to be planned approval of this case. The first objection has to do with just the general plan amendment. These property owners have relied upon the existing use being mixed-use commercial and would like to see it stay that way. The next major issue is the setback and building orientation. The 20-foot setback on the northeastern end of the property is too close to the existing multifamily. As you can see here, that's like 30 feet according to their site plan that was proposed. I'm sorry, it's 20 feet right here in this corner. The interested parties would also like to see that the three buildings here, 1, 2, and 3, be moved to the inside of the property and stay consistent with what you see on the north end. Have the parking on the exterior of the site plan. Why do the buildings have to be pushed to the edge of the road? It would create a nicer streetscape if you could see through there rather than see this canyon of buildings on the side. The building height, obviously, that's a big concern. These nice people here moved into the neighborhood expecting to be stuck with Adiamo, 2-story apartment complex. They were okay with that. Now, all of a sudden, they're getting a 3-story apartment complex slapped on their lap. They didn't buy into that. And if Adiamo and all the other communities in the area, multifamily communities in the area, can get by with 2-story buildings and 18 dwelling units the acre, why can't Suncor? You know, they hired the best, they say, in Arizona for multifamily architecture. Tap that resource. Try again. Don't just force this through. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the density again. You know, why does it have to be 18 units? If it can't work commercially, that's fine. We understand that. But again, does it have to be 18 units to the acre? How about 12 units to the acre? How about 8 units to the acre? Something different. They talk about this mosaic and they're wanting to offer some variety. Well, it's not a variety when you're just forcing higher density into the area. Right now, the market demand, it does not demand this. And the fiscal impact on the city is going to be negative. There are presently over 825 rental units available in the immediate area of this site, of which 15 to 30% is a generous calculation, are vacant today. On top of that, you've got 1,000 units that are already planned and approved for multifamily within a 2-mile radius. On top of that, there's another 1,300 that are in the pipeline. So now we're looking at 3,600 units within a 2-mile radius of this complex. It doesn't make any sense. That's all I have, if you have any questions.
All right, thank you. I have a
Yeah, I have a
card.
question. Excuse me.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it was not clear to me. The people you represent, do they live in this Andiamo apartment complex, or do they live in Camelot? Can you show us where they live? Can you?
It's actually
This one up?
it's a conglomerate of property owners. Some are commercial and some are residential, and they are within the 2-mile radius.
That's fine. Other questions of this public speaker? I don't think we're going to get an answer. Thank you. I have a card from Amanda Irvine. Do you want to speak on this item? Yes, please. Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the board members. My concerns really are much the same as have been spoken this evening, and I think really for me to repeat it, but the concerns are the same. One of the greatest ones would be the actual density of it. I think at this point we can't really say we would prefer commercial and not have apartments, but it would be very nice if they were 2-story. I say this because you have the fitness centre and then the other apartments at the end. It's a very short road and it's going to be very closed in, very compact. And I think aesthetically it would be disappointing in that area. I do have some petitions signed by the neighbours of Camelot Homes, if you're interested in that, against that. Thank you.
Give them to the clerk, please. Anything else that you'd like to say?
We were driving around the area looking at other apartments and other places, and I wanted to show that, let me see, excuse me. This here is an apartment complex, and you can see that the electrical pylon behind, it almost obscures that. And the same here. I just think aesthetically, 3 stories is just very closed in when you consider that this road is very short. It's not a long road where maybe you would have some ups and downs. And that's it.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes.
Could you identify yourself?
Yeah,
for the
my name is
record?
Bruce McCracken. I live with Amanda, and I'm a retired police officer, so I'm aware of the problems that go along with apartment complexes. We're looking at 401 parking spaces along with the traffic. Also, I would like to ask if a comprehensive traffic study has been done on 145th Avenue. Currently, we have photos. There is already a problem with people turning into the Lifetime Fitness going north from 145th and McDowell. There's pictures to show no left turn, as well as when they're coming from the south. So there is an issue that will be increased if you bring in another potential 401 vehicles on top of this problem. So again, I would ask that before you proceed with this project, that a traffic study examine that problem, and if they are going to go ahead with it, to possibly extend the median north to avoid that problem.
Okay, thank you very much. Could you pass these all over to Joe, please? Okay, I am going to, does anybody else from the public like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'm going to take comments from the commission. Comments? Commissioner Schlosser.
Quick question of staff. This site plan, is it conceptual?
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, it is conceptual. However, you probably noticed several of the stipulations require certain building heights. certain buildings further on. That part isn't conceptual. Any builder would have to comply with those steps.
I guess the reason for the question, someone had mentioned where the entrance is. Could that be something that could be changed slightly to mitigate it?
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, that is something that the applicant said he would look into come time of site plan review. I think our traffic engineering personnel would want to evaluate that. Usually driveways align for traffic safety reasons, obviously. Maybe there's an opportunity to, there's another driveway just north, a little bit north of here for the apartment complex. I don't know if it's a main driveway used every day. It might be just emergency access. I don't remember at this point. But our traffic engineering staff would have to look at spacing. But that's something I think the applicant said he would be open to looking into.
Okay. And has there been a traffic study done on this?
Yes, sir. The applicant did submit a traffic study with this application. Basically, its conclusion was that the existing infrastructure, the traffic controls in the area were adequate for this development.
Okay, thank you.
Don't go away. Mr. Williams?
Steve, can you show us where the entrance, the ingress and egress into Camelot is on this map?
Could you put this one back up,
Yeah.
Steve?
This is the parcel that's rezoning, and this is the entrance right here.
So that's access road to 144th Drive.
Yes, sir, into this development here. That's their access point right there.
And then on, I guess it would be the west side of Camelot Village along 145th Avenue, is there some kind of a buffer? Is there a wall along the boundary of that subdivision?
Yes, sir, there's these lots here, their privacy wall runs along these lines here. Then there's the entrance, and then the privacy wall picks back up along 145th.
According to this map, it looks like perhaps there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots that would have a home with a patio that would face west. Everything else looks like it would face north and south. Well, I'm sorry, not everything else. There's some farther down 145th Avenue. But everything along West Coronado and West Desert Flower face north and south and probably don't even have a view of what this complex would be. Is that fair to say?
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, staff looks at that as well, that these lots here would be the ones that would have direct view of the facility.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
I have a question of the applicant, because in looking, and I'm not really great on these distances from Lifetime Fitness where people come in and out versus where they would come in and out of this parcel, which is, it looks close. Is it a distance, or
Do
do you understand my question?
I think you need to zoom out. Not on, Steve, the other, yeah, you need to zoom out on that so you can, I think you want to ask about the.
Wait a minute, you've zoomed too far now. Okay, I see where I am.
I don't know how to use this, but is it controlled over there, or is it controlled here?
Right here.
Okay.
Commissioner Miller, what would you like to see? Which exhibit?
No, I thought I could, this one was fine for me.
Okay.
What I'm asking is, you see where Lifetime Fitness is? Well, they have an entrance way. You see where their entrance is off of 145th? My question is, and in looking at the rendering, would the entrance be to this parcel be close right at the,
I
here?
understand.
Or that's my question.
If I could transition into the site plan for just a moment. But a couple things to speak to that. This is a rezoning of the property request. It is not a request for a site plan.
Okay.
That's the first to your comment. But the way that staff, and I believe that the city requires it, is that you have to include a conceptual site plan with the rezone so that everybody can get their mind over what could be there. If the city approves a rezone, then when the developer comes in to develop this property, they will go through a process with the city. In order for, and one of the things that they'll look at again will be the traffic and how this flows. With that said, we did have a traffic engineer review the site plan before it was submitted, as we do with all of our properties. I didn't focus specifically on that, but the conceptual traffic conclusion was the way that this was designed was acceptable. Further, while I'm looking at this site plan now, I would assume that that the distance here would be the same distance and the same traffic conclusions as the residential project across the street. I would assume, but I'm not a traffic engineer. The bottom line is, a site plan, a formal site plan, will come back through, and the city will review those type of things more carefully than in a rezone, because this is all conceptual and subject to potential change, where this is located and so on.
So let me just go back over this, because this has been very helpful. What we need to decide, what you're asking us to decide, is whether this is going to be commercial or residential, high-density residential or mixed-use commercial, and that's it. These are just concepts, this one that you're showing now. Is that correct?
That is correct.
These are just, it could change.
Yes, it was a good faith effort to try and see how the site works.
Okay.
But it has to go through a formal site plan process.
So it may not look like this.
It may not look like this.
Okay.
And it may look like this.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Other questions of anyone before I take my turn? Steve, as the property is zoned now, a 56-story building could be built on this parcel, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
56 foot, not
I mean,
56 story.
I'm sorry. I know I like tall, but 56-foot tall building, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then when we did the PAD for the Lifetime Fitness and the other parcels that are part of that curve, they were allowed to be 56 feet tall, plus have 20 feet of artistic rendering on top. That was how we got the big glass dome on top of that?
The glass dome for Lifetime specifically is 57 feet tall.
Oh, okay.
So it didn't require any.
Okay, so let me
Chairman, it's 10 feet for architectural embellishments.
Okay.
56-foot height.
56 plus 10.
In commercial, plus 10 feet for embellishments.
Okay. A typical 3-story apartment building would be how tall, give or take?
I think it's 12 feet a story, 36
So-
feet.
So we're looking at 36 to 40-foot building as a 3-story building, and a 24 to 25-foot building as a 2-story. Is that correct? Give or take. Okay. Any other questions? And last question. If a 56-foot building was placed along 145th Avenue, what would the setback be of that building from the street?
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be 56 feet. It's 30 feet standard, and then it's a foot for every foot over.
Okay, and that's from the property line, not from the center line of the street. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, property line.
and the street is about 60 feet away, or the 60 feet cross-section, right? Because it's a minor collector.
The street's a collector. I think it was about 80 feet of right-of-way.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, I think if it's commercial, assuming it's commercial, you're saying it'd be a 30-foot setback if it's 56 feet high.
Okay.
So if it's multifamily, it would be a different setback, I believe.
Right.
Okay. Just want to
But
clarify.
basically, what I'm trying to ascertain is if the property remains in the present condition, the potential use would be a 56-foot tall office building with a 30-foot setback from 145th Avenue. That's the potential.
Correct.
Whether that's commercially viable or not, that's the potential. Just want to make sure everybody understands that. Yes, you can come up.
Thank you.
Come up and
I forgot
talk.
to add something. As far as the height, I did speak to the general manager at Lifetime Fitness a few days ago, and he was not aware of the project. He said they were a large corporation. Immediate concern would be the young children that they have a playground on the north side of Lifetime Fitness. And he said, so if you put the 3 stories there with people looking down upon them, that was their immediate concern. So that is something that I would hope that the commission would take into consideration, is the children that are on that playground when the parents are working out would be just overpowered with those 3 stories and possibly some people that aren't so nice looking down at them.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Any other? Mitch, come on up, please.
For the record, I'm Mitch Rosen. I do want to say with regard to Lifetime Fitness, we have been in discussion with Lifetime Fitness. Lifetime Fitness is conceptually supportive of this. To the point about the children and the concern about that, we have agreed that with Lifetime Fitness's request that there's a certain area that's a no-build area, and that's specifically in response to the concern that the gentleman just identified.
Okay, thank you very much. I have one last question of staff. If this goes through its normal evolution and gets to council and it passes, then obviously it passes. But if it does not pass, when can Suncor bring this project back to us? They have a year wait, is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. If it's the same exact application, it would be a year delay. They'd have to wait a year before they can resubmit the same application.
Okay, thank you very much. Commission comments?
Always look at me.
Well, I'll start over
Start
here.
over there.
I'll look to the left.
Okay.
Commission comments. Commissioner Schlosser?
I'll reserve my comments.
Okay. Commissioner Williams?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure anything's going to happen here real quick because Mr. Rosen indicated that they will not be developing this complex. They will try to sell the land, and I don't think too many people that are going to build apartments are in the market for this type of property, and probably won't be until the market starts to come back, which I agree with Mitch, it'd probably be the better part of 2 years anyway. And I think a residential complex would be a whole lot more appealing than a huge commercial or industrial property. And I guess I am in favor of the proposal, and I guess I would have to rely on staff when they come back with the site plan to make sure that it is an upscale and maybe a more upscale complex than Adiamo, and actually wouldn't really compete with Adiamo or some of the apartment complexes further north on the north side of Indian School there that are very large. Thank you.
Oh, me?
Oh, your turn.
Rare as it is, I agree with Commissioner Williams, totally. and that is rare. I think that if there are choices to be made, certainly not a commercial 56-foot building, which is what it could be now. Certainly a residential area or apartment buildings would be better. And I totally agree with what Commissioner Williams stated, and I am in support.
Commissioner Lax, Vice Chair, excuse me, anything? The chair has some qualms about this, and I think the action is premature based on the market conditions, but that's not our job as planning commissioners to consider the market conditions. Our job is to look at the best use of the property in relation to the city's general plan and what the adjacent properties are looking at. I hate to put words into the public's mouth, and I hate to put words into the people who live there, but as Commissioner Miller and Commissioner Williams have said, I think a 2-story and 3-story apartment building is a lot better than a 56-foot office building. And the chair is going to support the measure. Anybody else want to say anything? Okay, can I have a motion to approve this item? And I want to make a public comment after we do have the vote.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of case number 08200-00011 with stipulations as indicated.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Williams, a second from Vice Chair Lux. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, ayes have it 6-0. Okay, public comment for the residents and people who were against this project. This will eventually come before City Council. You'll have another opportunity to voice your objections. I thought that all the comments were well done and appropriate, and I encourage you to come before City Council and let the council know where you stand on this project. Yes, ma'am.
Can we be informed, because as a resident, we were not informed about anything like this until our neighbor came over and brought the letter to us?
If you filled out a card, you will become on the mailing list for this agenda item. My suggestion to you is every Thursday, the City Council agenda is published and on the Goodyear website, and this will probably come before about 3 weeks' time. Joe? Steve? 4 weeks?
We believe it'll be probably June 22nd.
June 22nd.
And there'll be publication of notice, and letters will be sent out. If for some reason you didn't get a letter and you have given us your name, we'll be sure that you'll get one based on providing us with your address.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it pretty much final that the 3-story buildings are going to be in the back? That will not change?
The plan is conceptual.
Right.
So whoever buys the property will have to come back before, it's not on the stick.
It is.
Before staff to discuss a, site plan review. One of the things you can request, and, you can, if council approves this, you can request a stipulation that the site plan go through the public hearing process so that you have some input into the site plan itself, so that the 2-story buildings are adjacent to 145th and the 3-story buildings are closer to the commercial. Those are some of the options that you have. Any other
Mr. Chairman, I would point out that one of the stipulations that's recommended is that the buildings over 30 feet be set back a minimum of 180 feet from 145th, so that portion is at least been addressed.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this? Otherwise, we're moving on to the next item. Okay. I thank you very much, public. I'm moving on to item number 0820000010, planned area development for Track E of Palm Valley Phase 8. And Mr. Kretschia, you're up again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. Again, like the previous item, this item was before you on the April 15th. It was continued, so proper notice could occur. We did take care of the notice and did conduct a neighborhood meeting on the 12th. This is the property location here, 159th Avenue, McDowell Road, Pebble Creek Parkway, I-10, West Course project here. This request is a PAD amendment. It will change the land use from medium-density residential to high-density residential, increase the maximum building height from 30 to 40 feet, and the applicant is also looking for a modification to the setbacks from the north and east property lines. Required is 75 feet. The request is to go down to 50 feet. Like the previous project, the maximum density is capped at 18 dwelling units per acre. And here with the master plan for Palm Valley, the project location right here within Phase 8 of Palm Valley, currently designated with a medium density residential. And this is the conceptual site plan showing what development could look like at 18 dwelling units per acre. Setback here is shown at 50 feet, which would be entirely landscaped per stipulations, and along here a 30-foot landscape buffer. These buildings would be two-story. This would be a one-story element here to this building, and in here would be building heights would be allowed up to 3 stories. As previously mentioned, a neighborhood meeting was held on May 12th. Several residents from the area did attend the meeting. Again, the staff report does outline what was discussed at the meeting. With the recommended stipulations, staff is recommending approval of this request. We find it is compatible with the surrounding area, consistent with the general plan. As such, we are recommending approval subject to those stipulations. With that, Mr. Chairman, my presentation is concluded. Staff is available for questions.
Questions of staff?
Steve, the 30-foot landscape buffer, that would include some reasonable-sized trees that in just a few years would grow to be fairly decent-sized shade trees?
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, we did address that, hopefully with stipulation number 5, 24-inch box trees. Hopefully that's an adequate size that within a few years will grow to screen the property.
And secondly, there is no access to, is it Palm Valley Phase 8, either to the north or to the east from this parcel?
You are correct, sir. No access. This is the only ingress egress to this parcel.
Thank you.
Other questions of staff? Mitch, please. You're going to identify yourself.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Mitch Rosen with Suncor Development Company. Some of the issues that we talked about in the previous case apply here. I will hit upon them, but we'll spend more time on the things that are unique about this site. I'm going to talk a little bit about the rationale, the reason that we are asking for the change in the zoning. Talk a little bit about the density height, the reason that we're requesting the building setbacks, and then again the context in which this property finds itself. I want to state that this project is multifamily with up to 12 units per acre allowed. That's the existing underlying zoning for the property. We had a developer in the, I think it was the heat of the top of the market or close, that tried to develop a project on this site, a townhome project. And what I've observed, and again, this is not my specialty, but what I have observed is in suburban marketplaces, these townhome projects often struggle. And that the reason, not always, but often struggle. And the reason is that often people want to buy larger houses out in suburban marketplaces, single family or being an apartment complex, and that in between doesn't have a very strong demand. In the case of this site, the developer went under contract with us with two properties. The first property, or the other property, was at Pebble Creek and Indian School, and I believe it had a similar zoning. That developer delivered some of those to the marketplace. It didn't find much success, and it's my understanding now that as they're building through it, that many of them are being sold to investors that are then renting them out. And so what you have in that case is, I think, not a good outcome. You don't have the ownership, and yet you have people that own these that aren't living inside of them, and you don't have necessarily the same kind of amenities. So again, when we looked at the properties that we own in Palm Valley and tried to prepare them for economic viability as we move into the next phase in this community, and we looked at this site, and in talking with our brokers and an apartment developer, decided that we would again come in front of you and ask for an increase in density from 12 units per acre to 18 units per acre. Now, this is on 7 acres, roughly it's 7.5 acres, so we're talking about an increase of about 40 units. The height and the density discussion is generally the same as it was on the other parcel. Both of these, and I don't want to get the two mixed up, but both of these are small projects, intimate. I would encourage them to be fine quality assets to the community. So with regard to the density, and this is not necessarily the appropriate form, but I don't know how you get 18 dwelling units per acre with a 30-foot height limitation. And this is not the forum to do it, but I think you have to ask for the 40 feet unless you're putting lots of buildings very tightly together, which is not respecting some of the land use setbacks and landscape and the like. The reason that we're asking for an adjustment on the setback for the building setbacks is as follows. And it's really best shown here. And let me take you here for just a moment. This is a single-family residence. I believe the requirement here is that you have to be 25 feet off the back property wall. So the residential rear yard's 25 feet off the property wall. These units are very similar in size. There's a restriction that these be only 4 units per floor. And we thought that this site was better utilized by having 50 feet of landscape, which would be the setback, and then the 2-story structures here. If we followed the underlying zoning, what is more logical that would happen there is we would stay more than 75 feet off of here, and instead you would have parking up against the residential. And we thought that giving the flexibility of not having to do that made it a better project. And so that's why we're asking for that request. I also want to point out that Suncor owns the majority of, if not all of this property through here. I think maybe we have one that is in escrow, or maybe two that are in escrow, but we own the majority of it. So very sensitive, obviously, that what we're doing here will affect or impact on the value of the rest of our land as well. And again, this is also in the high-intensity mixed-use corridor, which is the general land use overlay, encouraging 20 units or more, and we're asking for a maximum of 18 units. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions of the applicant?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Mr. Rosen, you said that the problem with the developer were townhouses. So a two-story building couldn't just have apartments? Do they have to be townhouses?
No, they do not. They could be for rent rather than for sale. But it goes back to wanting to do a fine quality with amenities project, and it's more difficult when you don't get the density to have the clubhouse and the pool and those type of things.
Okay.
Other questions of the applicant? Okay, I have one person. You're done.
I'll leave this up. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
leave that up. Zoom out a little on that, Mitch, would you? On the top, so that, yeah. And then push it down so we, there, yeah, that's great. Now we can see the rest of the world.
Sorry about that.
Okay, I have Andrew Tice, please.
Sorry, Andrew. I'll give you the stage. I'll give you a stage here in a second.
That's good, Mitch.
Good evening again, Chairman Gelzer and Commissioners. I'm here again on behalf of you tonight. My name is Andrew Tice, 7702 East, Doubletree Ranch Road, Suite 300, Scottsdale, Arizona, on behalf of the same property owners as case 00011. Based on the outcome of that case, I'm going to truncate my presentation quite a bit because it appears that there's one direction this is going. However, I would like you to become familiar with Section 3-2-12B5 of the zoning code that clearly states, as it relates to multifamily development, particular sensitivity shall be displaced to the relationship between a multifamily project and adjacent residential uses of lesser density to minimize the impact of those less dense areas. Just a minute ago, Mr. Rosen indicated that this was a much preferable how do you zoom this? Oh. Mr. Rosen indicated that this would be a more preferable orientation, having a 50-foot landscape buffer on the eastern property line. But on the northern property line, you've got what also has a landscape buffer. It's not 50 feet, but who's to say a landscape buffer has to be 50 feet to be effective? You can have very tall trees and a lot less width than 50 feet. So by adhering to the zoning code and requiring the 75-foot setback, you can accomplish the same thing. You can still have your landscape buffer on the eastern border, moving these properties back like they should be, at least 75 feet from there, and have your landscape. Why is this the only way? And I know this is not about site plan approval, but by allowing that stipulation to be in there at 50 feet, it's just not necessary, and it's in strict violation of the zoning code. The other thing Mr. Rosen indicated was he said with 136 units, they can offer the amenities of an upscale apartment complex. I'm familiar with apartment complexes, and I know that it takes a lot more than 136 units to support the level of amenities he's advertising tonight. So let's not be fooled by that. This is going to be a run-of-the-mill apartment complex. If that's the case, then let's stick to the zoning code, 2 stories, 75-foot setbacks, and call it a night. The last thing, I mentioned this before. There's 3,600 units planned for this immediate area. 800 are in the ground. 1,000 of them are approved and under construction, and there's another 1,300 pending. It's really not right to bring this before us tonight. Why not wait? Let's see what the market does. Maybe there's a demand for 136 units down the road, but why does it have to be decided tonight? That's all I have.
Thank you. Somebody else wanted to speak? I saw that. Give it to the clerk, please, and then identify yourself.
Good evening. My name is John Myers, and I live at 15777 West Berkeley. What that means, of course, some of you that remember from last month, I live in this community.
Could you zoom that out so I think...
That's a good question, sir.
There you go.
Is that the correct direction?
Yep.
Look at that.
And I think you live somewhere up in that...
Yes, sir. Just
yeah,
right over.
right about there. Thank you.
I'll be honest with you. The reason that we're all here tonight for this particular amendment is money. Let's be honest. It's already a multifamily area, planned for 2 stories, setbacks that this board or one like it submitted and said this is what this should look like. We're here because Suncor wants to sell the development to make it more attractive to a buyer, is to make these changes and get this area increased in size for a buyer. As stated tonight, everybody understands there's an economic downturn, which basically means that things just aren't selling and things aren't buying. We have people talking about 50%, 40%, 70%. Any way you look at it, those are vacancies. Okay, those are apartments that are vacant. Suncor is not going to develop this property. That means they're really not concerned about doing anything but selling it at this point. We all know a conceptual drawing means that there's not going to be an apartment complex that looks like this necessarily put right here. However, if you put a 3-story building on this lot, they're looking down into the homes and potential homes for people who are actually buying and owning the property that they're living in. And unfortunately, maybe the townhome development did fail based on financial and other concerns that we're all aware of. We're not going to develop this for years. We've talked about 2, 3, 4, 5 years before things are developing and moving again. If that's the case, maybe in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, a nice townhome community could be built in there. Or an apartment complex like the ones discussed earlier today that are 2 stories in height, that follow the rules set forth by this board, 75-foot setbacks, the areas that are designed so that people can get in and out. However, we talked a lot about ingress and egress. If we add 46 more units to this road, I don't know that a traffic study was really done, and if it was, I'd like to know where this person went to their engineer school based on the fact that this road is about a mile in length and it's 2 lanes. So 46 more units, you're talking probably potentially up to 50 to 90 vehicles in addition being put on that street. As mentioned in our previous meeting, there are 2 ways into the community that I live in, and that's this road and Monte Vista. That's it. If you add all of those extra vehicles in there, I do not believe that a correct traffic assessment and the engineers have done their work to ensure that that would be trafficable. When you combine the fact that you have homes that would be looked into, this is not a buffer of 80, 100, and 250 feet, whatever, as discussed previously. These would be homes that are apartments that back up directly into homes, looking down into the backyards of these people who live in these homes, that want to purchase these homes, who have no more privacy. A 24-inch box tree, I'll let you know that I just purchased a couple for the backyard of my home. They're about 4 feet tall. 24-inch box tree means absolutely nothing. It means the size of the box the tree comes in. It doesn't mean how tall the tree is. And I can tell you that I will probably not live in my home before my trees are tall enough to block anybody's view from my yard. I am not against the idea of the multifamily homes. I don't see why we're here discussing a change to a property that is already a multifamily home, wanting to increase the allowed tenancy when we already know that there's 1,000, 2,000, 20%, 50% vacancy rates in the apartments and homes that are in Goodyear as it is. I do not believe that it's economically advisable for anybody to build an apartment complex in this community at this time looking to increase vacant apartments. Having said that, I would just ask that you look at that, the things we've discussed. It is already zoned multifamily. I do not believe there's a need to increase the amount of homes or apartments available. I also do not believe that any change to this area does anything except provide more money to the seller of the property than it would do for the community at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Just come up and identify yourself, make your comments, and we'll let you, there's a card here that you can fill out afterwards and give it to the clerk, please.
My name is Jason O'Clair. I'm one of the partners with Vivo Development Partners. We're actually the owner of the project that they showed for the front entrance of one of our properties in Surprise. I'm here to speak kind of the quality of the product if we were to go forward on this project. And keep in mind, we're looking at the site for a couple years down the road. I don't want to get into the demand issue of apartments, but to counter the gentleman that was before me's or prior to the gentleman before me's argument, we can get into a debate on vacancy. I have a project on 115th Avenue in Van Buren, and I'm 90% occupied. So we can go round and round. He represents competing interests, so I understand his point. As far as the size, 136 units, if I recall, Mitch based this product type, the site plan layout, on a product that we did in Surprise. That's 142 units. So we can make it economically viable. It's not going to be a slum as it was referred to. As such, when we were at the last neighborhood meeting, I invited any potential neighbor that had a problem, come to our properties. Our level of amenities are about as upscale as you can make them. We have movie theaters. We have a resort-style pool. We have a superb clubhouse, internet, business center. This is not a product type that is going to be, because we can only get a certain amount of units, is going to be a dog. It's going to be a really viable project and a great asset to that surrounding area. So I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up as to the product type is being misrepresented a little bit.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's a card here. Would you fill that out and give it to the clerk, please? Does anybody else from the public wish to make a comment? I have a question of staff. Come on back up before I close the public hearing. Steve, there are several comments about a 75-foot setback, and I'm reading through this, and I, refresh my memory, or refresh the commission's memory on if that's correct, why, where, et cetera.
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, there's a requirement. It's in the zoning ordinance, the multifamily section. It does require a 75-foot setback for two-story buildings from a single-family residential zone. So that is a setback that is in our multifamily development standards.
Okay, so the 50-foot landscape buffer setback is basically we're doing some type of a variance in the approval process. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Through this action, they are requesting a deviation.
Okay, and staff in their concerted wisdom believe that a 50-foot landscape buffer is more appropriate than a 75-foot parking lot. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, we did look at those two options.
Say yes, Steve.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff before I close the public hearing? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for commission discussion. Comments? Anybody want to make a comment?
Yes.
Go for it, Commissioner Miller.
Before I could understand and agree with Suncor, this was done, if I'm correct, was this PAD done since 2005, between 2005 and now? Anybody? 2005, okay. So we're talking 4 years ago. They came before us, before the commission, and asked for a two-story, medium density. I don't know what happened. Well, I do know what happened, but now they want high density. I don't think it's been enough time, personally. I don't see why we need to give them this amendment at this time. I happen to agree with Mr. Tice, is it? I happen to agree, not that it's going to be a dog. No, I don't believe that part. But that I don't think I don't see the reason why we need to. Yes, you have a developer, and I know they're few and far between, but then it's just one developer. Maybe there's a developer that can offer a quality product with what we have. So I don't know that, but I just think that I just think we should leave it as it is for now, so I would be voting against the measure.
All right, thank you. Other comments? Other comments? Okay, can I have a motion for approval for case 0820000010, track E of Palm Valley Phase 8, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of case 08-200-00010, the planned area development amendment for tract E of Palm Valley Phase 8.
Okay, I have a motion from Vice Chair Laux. Second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Schlosser. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
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 Okay, the ayes have it, 4-2. Commissioner Ryan, would you please state your objection for the record?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I hadn't made up my mind on this before tonight. I listened to the testimony, and I just think that it's appropriately zoned at this time, and if it turns out in the future that there is no market for it, then maybe we can consider it in the future.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner Miller. Good, it's good stuff. Next, we're going to do the next item, the university, and then we're going to take a break.
Having said that, will that be at the same city council meeting so we can argue the point of changing this?
Yes.
22nd?
Again, I encourage you to go to the city's website and check the agendas. The agendas are posted on Thursday of the day before the Monday meetings. Okay? And standing in for Planner Birmingham is Senior Planning Manager Mr. Schmitz. And I will open the public hearing on case 08-200-0012, the University Park Development. Let her rip, sir.
Mr. Chairman and Commission members, good evening. I'm just the plain old planning manager, not the senior planning manager.
Whatever. Oh, okay, excuse me. You are part of senior staff.
Actually, Bob is older than I am, too.
At the adjective senior.
That's right.
Okay.
Get
on with it.
What I plan to do is I'm going to introduce the item, then I'm going to ask Lloyd Zola with HDR to walk you briefly through the PAD concepts, and then at the end of his presentation, I'll wrap it up, reporting on the citizen review meeting and the staff recommendation. This is the city's of Goodyear's request for final PAD zoning for the 100 acres of property that we own. That's located at the northwest corner of Goodyear Boulevard and Estrella Parkway. The surrounding land uses that you can see is to the south is the northwest quadrant of the city center site that the city also owns and recently got PAD approval on. The Desert Edge High School to the immediate south. The Wildflower Ranch residential single-family subdivision to the west and wrapping around to the north, and vacant land in agricultural use to the north, and the Centera subdivision to the east, along with the LDS Stake Church, the Serafina Apartments, and the city post office to the southeast. The property is currently designated as public quasi-public through a recent general plan amendment that we processed. The surrounding land uses fairly well match the land uses that are existing, with the exception of the property to the north, which is designated for low, medium density residential and medium high density residential as a future use. You're well familiar with history of the property. We bought the property from Lula May Hudson primarily for the purpose of developing a city park. Then in 2007, the mayor and council began the process to attract universities to a portion of the city-owned site. The city in 2008 entered into lease agreements with the University of Incarnate Word and Franklin Pierce University for 30 acres each so they could build university campuses. And this PAD is basically what sets the stage in terms of the zoning for the property to establish the uses, the permitted uses, and the guidelines under which it would develop. At this point, then, what I'd like to do is ask Mr. Zola to come on up, and he'll walk you through the concepts and the approach that's been utilized in developing this PAD.
Thank you, and we'll also figure out whether I can actually work the machine here. He says it's easy. Okay, there we go.
Could you identify yourself for the record?
Yes, Lloyd Zola, HDR Engineering 101 North 1st Avenue in Phoenix. And what you see in front of you is the basic layout for a community park and 2 universities. The park zone to the west portion of the site, and then you will see the 2 universities to the east side of the site. The basic concept is the 2 leases of the 2 universities actually stretch out in an east-west fashion. Franklin Pierce on the north side. And I'll explain what these zones are because it is a little bit different than traditional zoning. This is very much like a form-based zone that you'll start seeing more and more of. The park zone is on the west side, as I said. The park has not yet been programmed, and there are zoning requirements, development requirements in the PAD for that zone. Separated from that, from the university is a north-south street that would provide access to the park. The BZ, the yellow areas, are the building zone. Those would be the areas that buildings could be put into. And then you will also see an area along Estrella and then on the north and south side, right in this area that we have identified as urban frontage. The concept is along that more heavily traveled area, greater building density, and what we're asking is in that area a minimum 75% building coverage, even though the balance of the campuses will be much different. The greenway zones running both north-south and east-west, the purpose of the north-south is the access for pedestrians to the city center to connect the universities to the library that will be at the city center because there will be joint use. The east-west greenway zone to provide access to the community park and a separation between the 2 universities. This shows the building heights that we are recommending. Within a park, there would be structures that would be fairly limited, play structures, maybe a building, restrooms, obviously. And what we are trying to do is keep the building heights lower adjacent to the residential areas and any structures lower than they might be in other areas. The east, the area that you see running northwest to southeast, that is a carryover and a continuation of the view corridor that was established in City Center to create views of the mountains. And so we are asking in the universities for a lower building height there. So as people are at that city center park looking up at the mountains to the northwest, they would actually be looking out over buildings. We had discussions with the universities about keeping that completely clear. That would not be consistent with the leases and the amount of land available to develop. So we did settle on a lower building height. The other thing that we did is you see up at on Harrison an area of 35-foot building heights, trying to keep those buildings lower adjacent to the residential areas. What we also want to make sure of is in that urban frontage area that where we are asking for greater density, that in that area we've actually established a minimum building height so that we would not have low buildings covering the frontage along Estrella. Very consistent, or as consistent as we can get with the city center to the south, but create a more urban look on Estrella. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is access, and this is where we have gotten some public comments. I'll start on the east end, and then we'll get over towards the residential neighborhood where we have gotten some comments. On Estrella, there are 2 access points, one for each university. Those would both be limited to right in, right out. And that is due to the style of development approvals. On the east side, we cannot get access points lining up so that both universities could get access and full turning movements. So the engineering group looked at those being required as right in, right out only. The main access points to the universities, we would presume, would be from Harrison for the Franklin Pierce University and the Southerly University from Goodyear Boulevard. That point is about where both universities had said they would have the separation of administrative uses primarily to the east and classroom type use to the west. We look at potentially 2 more access points from Harrison and then 1 more access point from an extension of the street that runs along the north side of the high school. And there have been discussions with the high school and the school district, and they have been supportive of ultimately making that a public street. And those discussions would have to continue because right now that is private. There has been some discussion from the neighborhood regarding access to the community park. We show it here from Harrison. I think the preference of the community would be to move that off of Harrison. And since that park has not been programmed and we have access on the east side of the park and can get access on the south side, that should be doable. The last thing I wanted to say about access is that we do not have site plans from both universities. We have looked at some traffic analysis, but really until the universities lay out where will parking areas be, what will their student loads really be, a real final concise traffic study can't be done. So we may be looking at a wider section on Harrison, looking at an 80-foot right-of-way rather than what shows now as a 60-foot right-of-way. That way we've covered the contingencies of needing that right-of-way if there. And I think that's everything.
Thank you, Lloyd. Stand by in case there's questions. The citizen review meeting for this item was held on May 12th. There were 9 individuals attending the meeting, but there were no comments or opposition expressed at the meeting. We have had some contact via telephone and in person from residents in the Wildflower Ranch subdivision. And as Lloyd alluded to, there's been some concern about the potential for where the parking lots would be located at the park, whether they should be close to the neighborhood or more removed. Cut-through traffic that might try to go through the neighborhood rather than using the other streets that take you to arterials. And then potential speeds on Harrison Street, because it is, as shown on the map right now, a pretty straight street, and they tend to lend themselves to speeding at times. Our response basically has been that, number one, the park site has not been designed yet, and that's certainly the location of the parking lots is something that will be taken into consideration at the time that is done. In fact, we'll probably take the arrow that's on the map off the map just so people rest assured that that's not necessarily the location of access to the park, but it's one that would be considered. And then secondly, when Harrison Street is designed, we will work with our engineering staff to try to consider the design in relation to speeds and do what we can to try to minimize that impact. So basically, that concludes the presentation. Staff, as previously in the general plan case, we're the applicant, so we're recommending approval of this particular case and ask that the commission recommend approval to the city council.
Questions of staff or the design, the engineering people? Questions? Sean?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Sean.
Sean.
How does the, apparently the situation where it once was 2, but now is 1, affect this? Because is it not that one of the colleges has removed itself and has decided to pursue other opportunities? I mean, is that going to affect this? I mean, I know that the mayor and others are pursuing higher education opportunities, which is fine. I'm curious as to how this dynamic will play into the site.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lux, the fact that the University of Incarnate Word has provided notice to us that they intend to terminate the lease does not necessarily affect the PAD. The PAD still sets the parameters under which the property would be developed, and I think it's flexible enough that it can accommodate another user. And I'm sure that the city is intent on pursuing finding another user, just as has been stated in the past, that the opportunity to provide access to multiple universities is desired by the city. And I don't know what the prospects are specifically tonight, but I know that there has been other interest expressed, so I would suspect that we'll be successful in finding another partner.
I certainly hope so.
Other questions?
Yeah, best case, do you have any idea when we might start to go vertical?
I believe there is a representative here from Franklin Pierce tonight, and I believe that they are talking about having vertical construction in 2011.
Yeah. Thank you.
Which is actually not far off from the timetable that we would be building the City Hall if the decision to go forward with that is made by the council.
Other questions? I have one or two, Joe.
Okay.
On the, if you put up the other drawing with the arrows, you know, the access, where the yellow arrows are access to parking, is that correct? Vehicular access to parking?
Generally speaking, that's correct.
Okay,
yes.
and the Street B, Street A are the only streets that wind up cutting through the property and are planned along with Harrison on the exterior, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Going to page 52 of the diagram where you have the parking stall diagram, there is a bunch of angular parking here, and then on page 53 there is parking lot dimensions for 90 degree, 60 degree, and 45 degree angles. Is the picture on 52 just an illustration of the way it could be, or is that the preferred way, or where are we on that?
No, I believe that the diagram is just it's an illustration of how the parking spaces would be measured, and then the ABC correspond to the columns on the next page. So it allows a variety of parking angles.
Okay. And then last but not least, the greenways are pedestrian only, is that correct? I mean, pedestrian bike, Segway, scooter, whatever.
That's correct. That's the primary intent of the greenways, is for pedestrian access or bicycle access.
So people could come march up the greenway and protest the war if they choose to, just like back in the 60s when we were doing those things. Is that correct? Never mind.
I don't know about the last part, but
fine. Just a little bit of light humor.
Yeah, but you expect a serious answer, so
That's fine. That's fine. I think I'm done. Does the Franklin Pierce representative wish to speak to the commission, or just by being here, we appreciate you being here?
I think Joe did a make
Go for it. All right, everybody.
Thank you. We wish you well.
We wish you well. Any other comments? Anybody from the public wish to speak? Seeing none, I'm closing the public hearing. Any commission comments? Seeing none, what? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve this item.
Mr. Chair, I'll defer to you.
Go for it.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve case number 08-200-00012.
All right, I have a motion from Commissioner Ryan.
I second that
And a
motion.
second from Commissioner Miller. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it, 6-0. Okay, we are taking a 5-minute break. Recess, whatever.
Weird, random, spot.
All right, we're back in business. I'm going to open the public hearing. This is case 09-200-00003, zoning ordinance text amendment, Article 3, and the applicant is the City of Goodyear. And Karen Craver and Steve Kretschia from staff are going to make the presentation, and the public is no longer with us.
Come on.
But I'm going to be on my good behavior anyway.
We appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. We have not made any major changes since we workshopped this with you at your last meeting, so I'll buzz through the changes we did make. To the commercial zoning district, we are recommending deletion of the central business district zoning category. It was originally put in place for the city center, and that has all now been zoned PAD, so we can remove that. Amendments to the industrial district, we are creating a commerce park district. This is being done to accommodate demand for certain heavy commercial uses that are more compatible with industrial uses than being in your typical commercial centers. It will also allow for some recreational uses.
Karen?
Yes.
Question. On a commerce park, this is just a new category, and I-2 or I-1 or C-1 or whatever would have to apply to become a commerce park. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I mean, we have nothing, the zoning ordinance is not going to change a category on an existing property at this point in time.
It's adding in the industrial, we now have I-1 and I-2, the light and the heavy industrial. Then we're adding the third, being the commerce park, which will build upon the I-1 district and add in the allowance for incidental retail, some retail to serve those industrial uses, and again, those heavy commercial uses that I talked about.
Okay, thank you.
We are also allowing for, in the Commerce Park District, allowing for retail uses that will serve the industrial uses such as a copy center, sandwich shop, things like that. We have also done what we did within the residential zoning districts, and that was to create a use matrix rather than having individual use lists in each of the individual zoning districts. We have a use matrix. And then we have also added a number of definitions to clarify the uses listed in the use matrix. Since we posted the amendments on the city website and distributed them to the development community, we received a few pages of comments and questions and suggestions from Suncor. They had questions on everything, the use matrix, the definitions, the development standards, but we received them a couple of days before we were sending our staff report out to you, so we had brief discussions with them and internally, and we've made some minor changes, but we're going to continue to work with Suncor to respond to their questions. So that was why we were requesting tonight that you continue this public hearing to your next meeting to allow us more time to work with them. And then we were also hoping to get input from you tonight on, in setting up the use matrix, we've set up categories to differentiate the uses. And in particular, I'm interested in, and I don't know if you're going to be able to.
Could you put I think we all have a copy of the use matrix.
Yeah.
Could you put it up on the,
There
Is
we
this
go.
what I'm yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
this is, the one area that I'm really looking for some help on is the warehouse distribution and storage category. Currently in the use list, you end up with lists of uses that really no longer exist. So if somebody comes in with a new use and you look at the list and it's like, nope, it's not on there, then what do we do? So we wanted to establish criteria, characteristic criteria that we could look at and evaluate a new proposed use and say, yeah, it meets this criteria. So it could be allowed in I-1 or I-2 or just in the Commerce Park. And we were hoping that this method would allow us to deal with new and improved uses that we hadn't yet thought of. And we did this also in the manufacturing, assembly, and processing category, where we've got, artisan, handcrafted, a clockmaker, a woodworker. Because that's very unobtrusive, it could go in any of the categories. Light manufacturing, we're talking previously prepared materials that are now being assembled. It's all being done within a building. General, you've got previously prepared, but maybe they have to do some outside work as well. And then you've just got heavy manufacturing of raw materials, and again, that would be a use permit because of the nature of it. So we think in terms of the manufacturing, assembly, and processing, setting up these categories works pretty well. It's understandable what we're talking about. We've included definitions to clarify what we're talking about. We're just not as comfortable doing the same thing with the warehouse and distribution and storage category, and I was hoping for some input from you. Is this the way to go in this, or are we better off just listing individual uses? What do you think? We're going to continue to evaluate it more. A lot of cities seem to do this, but it became apparent, and we know what we're thinking, we know what we're shooting for, but in getting comments and questions from Suncor, it seemed to us, maybe it's not as clear as in everybody else's head as it is in ours.
Are other questions, anybody want to start off? Because I have a couple of questions that I want to ask. Okay, on the manufacturing, assembly, and processing, they are not permitted in commercial, is that correct? If we were looking at page 3-3, but they are permitted in...
That's correct. The use matrix is set up so that if it's blank, it's not allowed there.
Okay. Why is general, on the manufacturing, you have general not permitted in a CP area, but it is permitted in I-1, I-2?
Well, the Commerce Park is intended to be the least intrusive, the least objectionable of those three industrial categories.
Okay, so basically we're making it more restrictive for manufacturing. And then now going to warehousing, distribution, and storage.
I was trying to think about what the characteristics of those uses were, and, does it all occur inside a building? Does some of it occur outside of a building? Are you talking about a whole lot of truck traffic, big trucks like at Amazon and Macy's? I was trying to figure out how to separate the intensities of those warehousing, distribution, and storage uses. And
how do you differentiate limited heavy truck volume from regular truck volume? I mean, how, if somebody comes in and says, how are you going to plop them into the heavy truck volume category versus a distribution center which has trucks coming and going all the time?
Well, and that is what is in my head of that heavy truck volume is the big tractor trailer trucks going in and out all the time. So maybe in addition to just the volume, it's also the size of the trucks. You know,
Do you think a footnote would solve that problem, so that you define heavy truck volume a little bit better for the applicant?
but and by the nature of the vehicle and
both from a
trips.
count, from the number of vehicles, size of vehicles. I mean, if you have cement mixers coming in, that beats up your streets a hell of a lot more than just regular delivery trucks, even though a lot of them.
Right.
I don't know. You're asking for ideas.
Yes. That's, like I said, in my head, what I was thinking about the heavy truck traffic was at Amazon, those big tractor trailer trucks that come in and out all the time, and they're sitting there idling, and while they're being loaded and unloaded, and. I think that probably smaller trucks, just as many maybe, wouldn't be as negative an impact.
Would we normally, in an I-2 area, would we normally ask for a use permit on some, a distribution center, or that's just a given that they could build it there because that's the appropriate spot for it?
That's the appropriate zoning, and they would just, go through a site plan process.
Do you think maybe heavy truck volume would necessitate some type of use permit? Do we want to do that? Do you want to do it? Because you're going to have to deal with them up front.
Yeah, I don't think it rises to the level of a use permit because there isn't, if you have the I-2 zoning, you're typically separated from any sort of residential development, and it's typically within a large park that has a couple of primary points of access, and then the lots are developed within the park. And I think just the very nature of it allows it to be done in a manner that the impacts are reduced. Whereas, like a fast food restaurant and the menu boards and the drive-through and the in-and-out and those use permit things, you have to look at them on a real case-by-case basis. But I think the nature of the I-2 developments and the PADs allows us to regulate the traffic from the trucks.
Wouldn't that be one more step that, just an additional thing that probably is unnecessary?
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Could you comment on waste and salvage and how that differentiates from maybe a sand and gravel type facility? And I'm not sure. I mean, we have the Gila River bed, and while we have the El Rio plan, somebody might want to dig out the sand and rock out of that river, and we don't have any kind of sand and gravel category, and where would that fit in?
I thought we had a mining category.
Presumably be under mining.
Yeah.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Did I miss them?
Yep.
There's a
Yeah, we
special,
have a mining category in and of itself, and.
Okay, and it requires a special use permit, right?
Right. We
Okay.
did that with kind of all the big open-air uses.
No, it says but SU is a special use permit, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Back,
Well, Commissioner Williams?
well, back to limited outdoor storage. A little while ago, when, I don't remember if it was California Pools or who was going to put in a facility on McDowell just west of Pebble Creek, didn't we talk about allowing some kind of outdoor storage for them, and where does that fit into?
I think that was outdoor display of the product that they sell, and we have some provisions, Steve, am I correct, in the
where the
commercial
church is
uses
going
that allow for that?
Has outdoor storage in the southwest corner of it, right? Where in that park, in that development park that we had the case earlier where the church is, there's the southwest corner of that park where the parking lot is all outdoor storage for somebody.
And isn't
Yeah,
that-
it's a business called Orco,
Right.
and that was allowed because the outside storage was completely screened.
Right. That's fine. No.
And isn't that C1 or C2?
No, it was located in an I-1, and then they
Okay.
then they
Thank
changed
you.
it to a PAD to accommodate some of the Commerce Park uses. So,
Other questions?
Can I ask you, just in general terms, do you think doing it this way is preferable to just listing all the individual uses the way it is now? Like, are we heading in the right direction, do you think? And
Well, let me ask you a question. What makes it easier for you to work with the developer?
because if they come in with something new, it gives me that ability to evaluate that new use and fit it within something rather than having to say, no, not listed, can't do it, and go through an amendment
What has
process.
been the development community comments on the matrix? We've approved one or two. Have we approved one matrix yet?
For the residential, you did, yes, yes.
But I mean, has it gone before city council, or they're all going in bulk because they're interconnected?
They're all going in bulk because of the overlap.
Okay.
We did signs and parking went to council, but the rest were holding up till. But I wasn't aware that the Suncor had commented on the residential matrix, had they? I don't think they had. You know, they had some comments on ours, and again, they had some ideas, you know, how do you interpret this? How do you interpret that? And that's what kind of led us to believe that, you know, maybe we needed to refine this a little more, but I just wanted to make sure you thought we were heading in the right direction before we.
Is there an appeal process if you say no at staff level for a use and it's not in the matrix and it's not explicitly defined? Are they allowed to come? They go to.
They can go to Harvey.
They go to Harvey.
Yeah.
And if Harvey says no, then does it stop there, or will it come to us? Somebody will, you know.
The Board of Adjustment serves as if there's an
Thank you.
interpretation of the zoning ordinance.
Okay. So there is an appeal process. So there is a codified appeal process that they can take this through. Other comments?
I much prefer flexibility over. It's just, I will tell you from experience that it's a lot easier to do it this way, as opposed to being just strict and rigid.
That's what we thought.
I think you're heading in the right direction, Karen.
Okay. Thank you. And can I get you to continue this public hearing until your next meeting, please, so that
Yes.
we can bring it back for final approval?
Does anybody have any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a motion to continue it.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve, or we recommend continue the public hearing to June 17th on case number 09220-00003.
I have a motion from Commissioner Williams and a second from Commissioner Peters.
Yay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Well, let's tell.
Ayes have it. He's trainable.
Thank you. We'll be
You're
back.
welcome. All right, work session.
Commission members, this is our continued effort at updating our ordinance. What you have before you is the PAD section, and what you have is two new sections that we're proposing. Article 3-5, as existing, is one section, covers both types of PADs, our independent and our overlay PADs. What we're doing now is going to separate both of those into two separate sections, so each section has its own development standards and processing guidelines. Hopefully that clarifies those two types of PADs. We're also, one change you've probably noticed is we're going to go to a one-step zoning entitlement process, which means that historically you've probably remembered the preliminary PADs, the final PADs. What we're doing there is our intent is to try to keep some of the old and go with some of our new policies, which you've seen as we've gone to final PADs directly with some of our applications. So what we're going to have is a one-step zoning entitlement process. You come in for a PAD, it goes before Commission and Council, it's approved, and your property is now entitled. What we're keeping two-step-wise is a development review process. You'll come in, preliminary development plan with your PAD application. That'll go to council, that'll get approved. However, you can't develop the property, you can't subdivide or site plan the property until you get that final development plan approved. And that final development plan will track through staff, commission, and council. However, that action will be more like an administrative action, more like subdivision plat approval versus legislative for a zoning action. So that's probably the biggest change that we've proposed. A lot of it is more for the clarification, organization, again, with putting both PADs each into its own separate section. Provided to you tonight was section or Article 3-6. Unfortunately, page 2 was left out of the commission packet, and page 2 had, for the independent PADs, it had a lot of information on the uses, the procedures, and then the last part was the requirement for the pre-application meeting. So if there's any commission questions on that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions on what was provided to you tonight. But this is just a work session format, no action required tonight. However, any input you have, any feedback, questions would be greatly helpful.
Steve, in deciding to sort of streamline the two-step PAD, how many do you think are, I don't know if there's an average number that you use to determine this, but I mean, how many are we talking about where basically they're coming in at the same time, preliminary and final on the same day? I mean, I'm not having, really that many issues or any issues for that matter.
Mr. Locks, are you talking who is using the process or how many we've processed?
Well, right. I mean, just how many? Because obviously, in deciding to streamline, it seems like your argument is that instead of the two-step process, it seems redundant. There's that extra step in there that isn't required based on the fact that the applicants are coming in and issuing a preliminary and final to be either considered on the same day or in the same meeting or fairly short order. So I'm curious. I mean, is that the most prevalent? Is that what you're finding, that the majority of cases that do that, or?
Okay. If hopefully this answers the question, Commissioner Locks, but I know recently in the last few years when we were getting a multitude of PAD applications in, many of them were trying to go with the final PAD step, and that was something we were allowing. If they were able to provide the information required, we were letting them go that way. That seems to be the route that many of the developers wanted to go. They wanted to skip the preliminary step, as it does save them a few years, and go right to the final. It seemed in doing this, it was providing maybe a more not developer-friendly, but maybe it is developer-friendly approach, allowing them to go with the entitlement process. That was a question we always wrestled with sometimes with our ordinance. When was the entitlement given? Was it with preliminary PAD or final PAD? And what we're trying to do here is hopefully clarify it's a one-step entitlement process now, and you'll get it once you get your PAD approved. Hopefully the development community finds this portion of the amendment that's something they will favor.
Other questions? Steve, in normal zoning, it's a one-step process. They apply for whatever category of zoning that they want, and they shift over. And in PAD zoning, normally we almost inevitably what's approved in the preliminary PAD, as long as it's, the final looks exactly like that, it's basically been rubber stamped. Is that part of our thinking that if zoning is a one-step process, maybe the PAD, which is a special zoning district, should be the same type of process?
Excuse me. I think the yes answer to that is many developers did say the same thing. If final PAD is a rubber stamp, is it really necessary? Why do we have to go through this two-step entitlement process? So again, we're trying to clarify it's a one-step entitlement process. However, some of the developers don't necessarily have the details up front when they ask for the zoning. The preliminary development plan, it's a little less detailed. We still are going to require certain information that we know Commission and Council wants to see, but they don't have to finalize many aspects of their development plan. That'll come later, and that'll come before you. So it gives them the flexibility if they aren't quite ready yet with all the site planning, subdivision details, but they can still get PAD zoning.
Okay.
Is that still?
I got lost there. If they have all the parts, they can get final PAD in one step. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
They don't have all the parts, they still go through the two-step process, or do they go through final with an amendment coming back when they have all the rest of the parts?
If they don't have all the parts up front, they'll apply for a PAD, they'll submit the preliminary development plan, they'll go to council, get approved. They will get zoning, but they can't do any site plan or subdivision yet till they get all the parts together, and that's when they'll submit the final development plan.
And the site plan will be administratively approved, or will it be P&Z council approved?
That final development plan will go before P&Z and council.
Works for me. Other questions? Commissioner Williams.
Does that say that sometimes there's one public hearing and sometimes there's two public hearings?
There will only be one public hearing, and that's with the zoning entitlement at council. The next meeting, it'll be a public meeting, but not necessarily the hearing aspect of it to where it's like a legislative action. It'll be more like plat approval.
Thank you.
There'd be no notice or anything required with the final development plan.
But if they don't have all the parts, they still have to, it will be a public hearing to do the last parts, right? Or no?
No, sir. It would be a public meeting.
So it would be a public meeting, but it would also come to commission and council, but there would be no mail-out notices.
Right. There's a distinction there that we're trying to make sure development community not put them through, because they would not want to go through another hearing where they wonder if their zoning is still.
Okay. Other questions? Then I'm going to close the work session. Any staff communications?
I have a question.
Oh, wait.
It's my turn.
Harvey.
Staff?
Yeah.
Harvey.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Commissioner Williams, go for it.
Well, I just, I thought a little while ago we approved a third monopalm for out at Pebble Creek by the RV storage area. There's still only two there, and I thought that when I went by there the other day, one of them, the palms were gone and only the cellular panels were up. Maybe, I'll have to look at that again, but it really struck me that it looked like
perhaps it was
the palm
trimmed
things
by
were
accident.
gone.
I don't know. We'll have to check on it. I don't know. We'll check on it, Commissioner Williams. We'll check on it.
Thanks.
I'll make a note of that.
Staff communication?
Just one, I don't know if you're aware, Brett Birmingham's not here tonight because he had celebrating a new addition to his family. A little boy, Cooper, was born Friday last week at 2 in the afternoon, I guess. So congratulations to Brett. So that's all I have, Chairman.
Motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second.
So
Just so
moved.
that I can agree with Leslie.
Right, for the second time in the evening.